So Junaid, are you just confirming on EDL? That's it. Voice, are we good to go? Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, brothers and sisters. Welcome to Real Talk Show. This is episode 2 of me, Nas, and my hosts, Junaid and Rashid today.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone.
Wa alaikum salam.
Okay, so today we got Winston Churchill, we got EDL and all the right wing guys, and then we'll be discussing Grenfell 3 years anniversary and so on. So straight into it.
Why did you do all these hot topics at one go, bro? They're all like Gorom topics. It's like you're gonna let us sleep tonight.
So for the non-English out there, Gorom means hot. So yeah, the reason why we choose these topics is because this is what's currently on the news at the moment. As you know, this is a weekly show, so we'll be discussing these topics. So straight into it, because we've got a 45-minute window and we've got a lot to discuss. So straight into it. I'll start off with Winston Churchill. So his full name is, wait for it, get ready for this one, Sir Winston Leonard Spencer Churchill. That sounds very posh, doesn't it?
I think he's got his granddad's, his thingy, everybody's name in there, I think.
Rashid, how many middle names you got?
Me, I got one middle name, bro, but he ain't Chowdhury, bro.
What about Junaid? Have you got middle name like Humphrey, Spencer, Williams, or anything like that?
Bro, don't even go there. My dad messed my name up. My surname's supposed to be Ali, yeah, but my surname on paper is Junaid, and my first name is, like, I've got 5 brothers. There's 5 of us, so all our first name is Mohammed. So we're all called Mohammed.
So Mohammed, Junaid, Ali.
Yeah, but I don't have Ali anywhere. In my exam papers, I got Ali. Anyway, too much information for the public, bro. Too much information.
Well, real talk, yeah. His dad did pop in Cornelius at the end.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, he's part of the establishment. Acha, come on, let's focus on the topic at hand. So Winston William Churchill Spencer Churchill was born in 1874 into a rich aristocratic family of both American and English heritage. Unfortunately, he did not do very well in formal education. He joined the army in 1895. He saw action. I don't think it's full-blown action as we understand it. It's more like a duty in India and in Sudan. And he gained fame as a part-time war correspondent. He got into politics through winning an election in 1900 in Oldham. During the outbreak of the Second World War, he was appointed First Lord of the Admiralty. In other words, he was the commander and chief of the Navy. In 1940, he became the Prime Minister, replacing the ex-Prime Minister of Neville Chamberlain. And then he got Britain involved in the Second World War against the axis of Germany, Italy, and Japan, if I'm not mistaken. So he had a number of great achievements. So you can find all these on Google. So it's not like I've made these up or thing. So I might not quote every reference as I go through it, but these are some of his achievements, and then we'll look at some of his non-achievements, if you will.
So, Brother Nasir, before you go in, yeah, I just want a quick question, yeah. So I know he's been hitting the headlines, but why are we talking about him today?
Okay, so reason why we're talking about him is because during, if you missed our first episode, check that out. It's to do with racism. And during the Black Power movement protests that happened almost 2 weeks ago in the UK, someone wrote, Winston Churchill racist. And naturally, when you have a figure or any statue in front of Houses of Parliament, it has to be someone of significance. So for those of you who don't know him, And I mean, we knew bits and bobs about him, but we didn't really know to this extent. So I had to Google him and find out his pros and cons and why someone would even write racist. To be honest, I didn't really know much about him, apart from he was prime minister of this country, and that's about it. And some of his views, obviously, I didn't agree with. But so that's what prompted us. And maybe we can go into the debate in a sec, in terms of, you know, statues in general, and, you know, why do they even have them? So some of his achievements was he supported the minimum wage in the 1900s. In other words, after he became an MP. In 1910, he became the Home Secretary, and he saw prison reforms in which he encouraged a distinction between prisoners of criminals and political prisoners. He pushed for that, and he wanted that distinction. He wanted the prison libraries, and he wanted for inmates. He also called for entertainment centers and lecture rooms and so on for prisoners. In 1911, he became the Lord of the Admiralty, in other words, head of the Navy, and he started building Britain's Navy to match the German Navy. In 1940, he became Prime Minister, and this is where Winston Churchill, in a way, made his name, and why the British public, and definitely the establishment, like him, is during the Second World War, he was the Prime Minister, and he was pushing for sophisticated warfare of military technology. In other words, investment into military technology. As it is today, we know wars are won through technology, as it is today. And then eventually the Allies, as we know, Britain, France, UK, USA, and the Soviet Union won with the surrender of Germany and its allies in 1945. He won the Nobel Prize for Literature for writing about his experiences in the war. He was naturally given the knighthood by our Queen, who's the current Queen, and he was given a state funeral. So in terms of his failures, I call it failures, or his non-achievements, or his bad views, his views on race. He believed whites were better than others. In 1937, he told the Palestinian Royal Commission, "I do not admit for an instance that a great wrong has been done to the red Indians of America or black people of Australia," meaning Aborigines. "I do not admit that a wrong has been done to these people in the fact that a stronger race, a higher grade race, meaning white people, a more worldly wise race, to put that way, has come to taken their place." So he argued that, you know, whites simply were better, superior race. So he was believed in that sort of white supremacy. He believed in racial hierarchy as well. So he believed white Protestant Christians were the highest, followed by white Catholics, and he believed Indians, i.e. brown people, were better than black people, and so on.
But wouldn't you say that most of these, you know, the views that this man had, yeah? Wouldn't you say at that time, in that era, yeah, most of the Eurocentric leaders, it was like that was what was going on? Wouldn't you say that? I mean, that's the argument that was the kind of society or everybody that was growing up, you know, because they didn't have, you know, colored people, black people in their school and stuff, so they were going to get a certain education anyway.
No, that's the thing. This idea that they didn't have. Remember, Britain had an empire at that time, so it was ruling large parts of what we now used to, what we call South Asia. South Asia was pretty much under British control. Most of Africa was divided between European powers. You know, they had Spain definitely had parts of South America. So Europeans knew full well, you know, colored people exist from hundreds of years ago. They dealt with them, and strange enough, Winston Churchill is a very complex figure. And on one hand, he doesn't like colored people. On another hand, as we will see, he plays polo with them. So I think there's a distinction between rich people and poor people. He definitely did not like poor people.
He's a
He did
Tory,
not.
wasn't he?
Say that again, Rashid.
I'm saying that he was a Tory, so that says a lot in terms of where they kind of like align themselves in terms of a social position in society.
Yeah, I mean, this is the modern Tory, if you like. But in terms of his day, he would historians have described him as an imperialist. He liked the empire. He was an imperialist. He believed in superiority of the white race. He believed in, and we can see images of Bengal. I'm coming to that as so. So he believed in use of chemical weapons. I'm sure him and certain leaders that we've seen in current world would get along fine in terms of using chemical weapons. So in 1919, Churchill has been criticized for advocating primarily using chemical weapons against the Kurds and of the Afghans. So he advocated for the use of chemical weapons. In 1943, he engineered what is now known as famously the Famine of Bengal, in which 3 million Bengalis, Muslims, Hindus, other faiths, Bengalis are a mixture of people, died. And what happened was he diverted grain that was due to be used in Bengal for Australia, and these people were not in famine. It's just basically top up their buffer stocks. As a result of this famine, they died, and his response was, they need to stop breeding like rabbits, and they got beastly religion. And what he meant by this, and many historians have said this, when he meant beastly religion, he's not talking about Islam, he's talking about Hinduism. So he didn't like Hinduism. When it comes to Islam, we'll tackle that later. But he didn't like Hinduism. He didn't like black people. He didn't like Asian people. He didn't like anybody, to be honest, apart from, white people. He had a racial hierarchy of, Protestants and non-Protestants, as we discussed earlier. His attitudes towards the Jews were basically, he was a Zionist, but he was at the same time, he was anti-Semitic. So he believed the Jews were an alien race, which only favored themselves and only wanted to do good for themselves.
So how does that work? How can one be anti-Semitic and Zionist? Can you explain that to people listening? Some people might not get a bit confused.
Yeah, so basically, Zionists are basically advocates of a homeland for the Jewish people, i.e. Israel. So that doesn't necessarily mean you like the Jewish people. You just want them out of your country, or you just want them out of the sphere of influence. And Churchill definitely did have that concern that Jewish people were quite influential in Britain. And in fact, his adversary, Adolf Hitler, one of the reasons why he killed so many Jews in Germany is because he thought that they would run Germany. They secretly ran Germany through their money, through their influence, through their lobbying. And as a result, he killed up to 3 million Jews. So as we are well aware. So you can advocate for the state of Israel, but that doesn't mean you like the Jews. So this is what it means. You're a Zionist for advocating state of Israel, but you don't actually like the Jews, so therefore you're anti-Semitic.
Okay, Jazakallah for that.
Yeah. So his attitudes towards Islam is quite complex, actually. So there's one part where he doesn't like Islam, he doesn't like Muslims, meaning his entire life. He goes through that phase of not liking Islam, not liking Muslims. But at the same time, you know, there was a period in his life where he studied about Islam so much, and he liked, during the Ottoman Empire, there was a grade in the military called Pasha. So Pasha Rashid, Pasha Junaid, it's like a military grade, and he himself wanted to be a Pasha because he liked the power they had, he liked the way they behaved, and he liked the conduct themselves. And to a point, his family wrote letters to him because they were worried he might convert to Islam. That's how much his fascination was with Islam. But historians have said that he was actually an atheist. He liked Islam like any other Victorian people at that time. Their fascination of Islam at that time was quite great. So he was very, a very complex relationship with Islam and Muslims. During his cabinet in the 1940s, his cabinet set aside £100,000 at that time, is quite a bit of money, for a mosque to be constructed in what is now current Regent's Park Mosque. Although that was constructed in 1970, his government actually pushed for that. And there was someone called Lord Lloyd who pushed for that. And the way Winston Churchill saw it is he saw it as Muslims fought for the empire, Indian Muslims fought for the British Empire during World War I, during World War II, and this is a way to reward them and accept them into British society. So this is actually...
Sorry, Brother Nasir, just to interrupt you there. I've just got some kind of live texts coming in. One of the questions to you, I guess, just a quick one to throw you out. Can you give some insight into the central government and trying to climb the ladder and challenging space, inshallah? I don't know what the context of that actually meaning. I guess it's about, the general Churchill influences in central government, etc.
Yeah, we could touch on that in a bit. Right, let me just go through this. So his government, despite their relationship with Islam, did set aside 100,000 for Regent's Park Mosque. And then what he said was later is that many of our friends in the Muslim countries from all over the East have already expressed their great appreciation of this gift. In other words, he was willing to sit with the Saudis because they were loyal to the British government. He was willing to play polo with Muslims of India because they were great servants of the empire. He was willing to go for holiday in Istanbul because they had interests. So this is how Winston Churchill saw it, is that he didn't particularly have problem with Muslims as long as you were subservient and quote unquote, you were law-abiding servants of the British Empire. And then I'll finish off with this last point, which is Palestine. It was under a British mandate. Britain didn't do its part for Palestine. Then, as a result, it's in the mess that is today. It helped to create a Jewish state in Palestine, but it didn't help to create a Palestinian state in Palestine. Because remember, the British people ruled large parts of, the British government ruled large parts of the Muslim world. So Islam, different colored people, was an alien to them. So that's basically his thing in a nutshell. But to be honest, 15 minutes is not enough to cover someone in depth. But I just wanted to get the main grasp points of why the British public or politicians love him because of his achievements in Second World War. And at the same time, why someone would write racist in his statue is because of some of these views of race, of imperialism, of different religions, and he didn't like Gandhi. He hated the guy, he called him a skinny fakir, the Bengali word fakir meaning poor. He was pretending to be a skinny fakir, he said, when this guy is actually a wealthy, rich, educated lawyer. So, obviously Gandhi himself, this is another topic in its own. Gandhi himself didn't like Africans. He himself was racist. So, in terms of British government, how he became influential, I think, is that the question? Do you think, or?
I'm just asked the person to give more context, but I think just whilst you're on that, I guess what's important. I guess what I was thinking about is, recent media hype about Churchill, and obviously some are portraying him as a great leader, and I get with the whole Black Lives movement, a lot of his past around his racist view has come light. And for me, I think what's highlighted is, subhanallah, what we in our deen, what are the characteristics that we look for? Allah has given us the guidance to look for in a leader, and look at the guidance that they have to choose their leaders. So regardless of certain views, regardless of kind of lies, killing the masses, etc., they can choose somebody like that. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us pointers of when we go out there and look out for leaders, the things for us to look at. And that's what I was thinking, does it meet any of those criteria just generally? And I don't know, that's something out for our listeners. Just do a quick one, just go on and go on the seerah and look at those pointers, and you could cross it out yourself and you see for yourself. And you think, even now when we look at leaders and choose them, on what basis do we do it? Do we follow the Quran and Sunnah? Do we look at compare the leadership style to our Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam? And that's something that's taken what I was reflecting on when I was hearing about Churchill.
Now that is indeed very interesting, because Umar bin al-Khattab, one of the greatest leaders of the Muslims, he was concerned whether the birds would be eating or starving. The birds, So if you look at from a Muslim point of view, obviously the standard is high. But for our non-Muslims out there, if you ask, would a great leader allow? Let me put it another way. If Boris Johnson allowed 3 million people to die in this country, UK, would that be considered an achievement or a failure? That would be seen as a disaster. Imagine 3 million people died through COVID. What do you think would happen? It will be a disaster. So when you're at the top seat, and Churchill was at the top seat, and India was under British rule. In other words, every Indian out there was a British citizen through its, rulership. And 3 million people died because that is a failure in leadership. Because you failed to protect these people, feed your own citizens or your own people in that case. And not only that, the reason why you failed is because of incompetency. You diverted grain because you wanted to stock up buffer stocks, because you believed certain parts of the world was more superior than another part of the world, only because of skin color. That is not achievement, that is failure. But at the same time, from the British public and some of these politicians, the way they look at it is that he helped them win the war, Second World War. He helped them to defeat Hitler, which is great. But at the same time, if you're only selectively teaching only parts of history, that in itself is a double standard. That in itself is a, and that's where the problem is.
What do you want us to? So as you was summarizing, what do you think that the key message is from this week's Churchill headlines then for us Muslims to take away?
I think Muslims and for the wider audience, Muslim and non-Muslims, I think the key thing to take is that Churchill was indeed a very complex figure. He done a lot of good things for this country from a nationalistic, imperialistic point of view. But he also had very gruesome people.
Yeah.
You know, he also had a very gruesome worldview of people, in terms of just because someone was, you know, of color, he also, you know, didn't consider all white people from this country the same. You know, for example, there was a strike for the miners. You know, I don't have it here. He wasn't in favor of them. They were white people. He didn't think of them. So, you know, and this is going on slowly to our next topic. So people who are shouting and screaming for him, you know, Churchill this, Churchill that, certain right-wing groups. If I'm honest with you, I don't think Churchill would give a damn about you people. You know, from what I studied about him and what I've seen about him, he only cared for his class, the rich elite, the educated elite. And from that, he only also had a bit of care towards the rich elite of non-white people. That's why he liked the Saudis. That's why he would play with polo with certain sections of the Indian Muslim community, because they were also, you know, servants. They were also, you know, benefiting, favoring the empire and so on. So what do you take away from him? He done some good things, but definitely he done some bad things. He had some really ugly views about certain people. And if you want to take away, if you're going to study history, study both sides of history, not just the victors. So that's basically what I would say. So in his statue, should someone have written racist? Well, the thing is, if you've seen the other side to it, you would understand why they would write racist. But at the same time, you would see, if you come from the other side, which is the nationalistic, imperialistic, patriotic side, you would understand why they were angry at the same time. What's happened is the two sides are probably not reading the other sides of each other, you know, the other sides of history. So if you want to take away something, read both sides of history.
MashaAllah. Nicely wrapped up. Brother Rashid, you got anything to say?
I just want to add that there is a big issue here when we look at figures throughout British history or even European history, right? We have to understand that where does this kind of notion start from? And a lot of it starts from a particular agenda, right? And we have to be honest about this, because we're putting generations of children through this academic system. So a lot of us probably got taught a lot of this biased history when we were at school. Do you understand? So, and we probably were conditioned to accept a certain narrative, because we're never shown two sides of the same coin, if you know what I mean. Yeah. So you're kind of like, you're not being, you're going through the filtered system that they want you to go through, and then you're taught this great, quote unquote, great history about Britain, but only to later on find out that, well, what's great about it, the only great about it that I can come across is the violence that's being forced upon certain communities around the world. Do you see? And then when you're talking about the imperial side of things, where you're extorting resources from these types of regions only to develop your own country, I don't see how someone can be proud of that. So when people are telling me, well, Winston's a great leader, and you were saying that, well, there's good things he's done, I can't measure those things that he's done in any category as good unless you're a person who supports oppression, yeah, of a certain type of people in order to steal their resources and to benefit a particular type of people, because you're not benefiting the whole country. Remember, your intention is only to feed and supply a particular class, isn't it?
Mm.
Do you see? So I find it difficult to say that, well, there's any good in that. You know what I mean? If you're a person, your interest isn't for the greater society and to benefit and feed and educate the whole of that society through means that is good and not that is harmful upon others, then maybe that's something that we can say that, yeah, this person is decent. Surely that country has produce some good leaders, and maybe that we can even look at the way that that person has gone through a particular educational system, had a certain upbringing, that maybe we can say that, yeah, maybe some of that we can even take. Do you see what I'm saying? But
Yeah.
I find it very difficult. Yeah,
Here,
so,
when we're talking about the good, right, you're trying to get into the mind of a patriotic, nationalistic, the elites of UK. The reason why they like him, the politicians like him, because you know he did help UK and the Allies win the Second World War, right? Now he did make the Royal Navy, or the British Navy, one of the strongest in the world. You know, all of these kind of things. But this is not in absence of his views, which obviously makes him a terrible man. You know, the thing is that when you're, you know, we all have sort of prejudices in our minds. But the moment you start, you know, extending those views, it means you're starting to show pride in your views. You're trying to be open and confident about some of your views. But the thing is, this person is not a normal person. This person's in the political authority. He's the prime minister of this country. And for that person to have these kind of views about, you know, Muslims, Jews, blacks, you know, Aborigines, this is actually something you have to question. Is that, you know, just the, you know that famous saying, like, does the means justify the ends, right? So I go and rob a bank, and then I give it to charity. Is that, you know, are you gonna now call me a hero, put up a statue of me in certain places of this country? Is that what we want? You know, and I'm not just picking on Winston Churchill. I'm just talking about general statues.
No, you got a point there, alhamdulillah. I think the thing is, all these points, they're like really points where you could, you know, I mean, Winston Churchill, you could study, the man's got a whole biography on him. And I think there's a lot of pointers for us. And I think it's a good starting point for all of us, especially people who are listening, just to go away, because it's out there at the moment. You're talking amongst your colleagues, it's in the news, and I think it's really good for us to kind of gain our knowledge. And and Jazakallah, Brother Nasir, to giving us that really, really kind of deep insight. I think it kind of nicely lets us move on to our next topic. And we got hopefully our brother Rashid, who's going to give us a little bit of a insight into this the next topic, inshallah. Over to you, brother Rashid.
Well, as you all know, today is a very, very is a tough day, actually. I'm doing a lot of not research, but I've been reading into it. You know what I mean? So for those that don't know, today is the 3rd anniversary of a traumatic. I don't even know if there's a word that can even put it be appropriate for it, but it was a traumatic day for those of Ladbroke Grove, where Grenfell Tower went up in flames. It's even difficult to even say such a thing because of the circumstances and the context behind it. Even there's a lot of things that I didn't even know until I start looking into it. Grenfell Tower is based in West London, as I understand, in a very complex borough, similar to us in Tower Hamlets, yeah. But this particular borough is known as the Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea. So just to emphasize the royal bit, Tower Hamlets ain't royal, mate. Yeah. So let's make sure that bit is clear. And what was interesting is that the south part of the borough is very wealthy, if you like. Large roads, a lot of Victorian houses. But when you're going up north, then it becomes a bit like our ends, isn't it? A bit like Tower Hamlets. It's all congested with people who aren't so well off. Who
Not applicable to everybody, bro. Not everybody. Yeah. Not
What's
everybody.
that?
Not everybody's from Tower Hamlets, man.
No, but I'm just trying to set the scene of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
I know
yeah.
you're from a very, very rich area, bro. So, you
No,
know.
it's just right away. It's just round the corner, man. I'm just putting it out there.
Yeah, man. But so for real, man, that borough is a complex
I think
borough.
Winston
Very
Churchill would play polo with him, bro, and not with
Huh?
you.
Say that again.
Winston Churchill would play polo with him
Yeah,
and not with
yeah.
you.
But he'll hold me like a polo stick. Don't forget that. Yeah, you know what I mean. But yeah. So going back to the borough, it's a complex borough. I remember going down and visiting Grenfell after the blaze, and if I remember right, that I think even when I went down there, I think some of the flame was still live. Do you see? And what's interesting is that what the expert look into in terms of these types of events is not what actually gets covered a lot. So they always look at the trauma, the gore of the whole thing, but they don't actually look into the whole science of it and why things turned out the way it did. You know, do you see? And just to add a bit of context to it, yeah, there's an architect called Sam Webb who kind of presented a report to the Home Office, and this kind of report was based on a survey of hundreds of residential blocks, which he found out that half the buildings that were built didn't meet safety regulations, right? And this is we're going back probably back to the 90s, right? And he went on to say that there's a disaster waiting to happen. So this is a while back now we're going, yeah? Now going on, now we're talking about, okay, the borough had like a £10 million budget to refurbish Grenfell. So what went on was that this budget went up for this. It's a contract that's going up to be tenant, so everyone's kind of like putting forward their budget in it to win the contract. So as I understand, that Ryden was one of the contractors that won the contract in it. And from what I understood, this was a documentary that was delivered that was presented by BBC. Now Richard Bilton was the one that was the reporter, and he went on to start saying that Grenfell itself, it was the single biggest loss of life in the UK for almost 30 years. So it's not a small event. It's a massive. It's a huge tragedy. You know, I mean, this is London.
Have passed away, and I was looking at this as well.
Sorry, say that again.
72 people, died in that fire.
But just to stop you there, this is what we've been told. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Let's just clarify
these blocks, right? These blocks are 20 plus, in stories high.
22.
Yeah. 20 plus 22 stories high. Each floor has about 4 flats. And there's families in each of those flats. So, if you do the maths, right, the amount of number of people in that block, and I remember this very well, it was Ramadan, and I was coming from, I think, Regent's Park or one of the mosques in Ladbroke Grove. I was driving past, it was about 1 o'clock. As I was going on that flyover, I just saw this not white, but single flame coming from top of the tower straight all the way down. And I thought, hold on, what's going on there? I just literally stopped my car in the middle of basically a flyover, right? Because it was just, the shock was just, and I put the window down and I could hear people screaming and shouting and stuff. And it's been 3 years on, but just that sheer experience, it's just still even having an effect on me. I didn't know these people. I don't know any of these people, but still has that effect. Can you imagine if you're a member, if your family members were in that block, who went through that? Can you imagine if your family died in that fire? So I guess 3 years on, what we want to know is, Rashid, they had a public inquiry.
No one's been held accountable as far as I know.
Yeah, so that's what I'm trying to get to. So the Royal Borough of Kensington in Chelsea, I remember I used to work for them at one point in life. Not during this event, and this wasn't even my department. But it is a borough of great contradiction. It's one of the richest boroughs in one of the richest countries, in one of the richest cities in the world. And within that, there's a lot of poor people. There's a lot of rich people. And what happened was, when they were going through the refurbishment, the idea was to make the building more appealing because there was rich private residential blocks nearby. And those guys didn't like the way this building looked. Can you imagine 22, floors high, 3 towers there are, and they didn't look very appealing. So what they done is they put cladding on to make it more appealing on the outside. So they only done it to the first building. The other two didn't get done at the time. And probably, alhamdulillah, thank God for that, it didn't get done. And basically a material that's, flammable, flammable. And the fire spread that's one of the reasons why the fire spread so quickly. 3 years on, I guess no one's been held accountable. So what do the Grenfell community, want from this? What have you managed to look into that, and what is their way forward?
Look, from what I've seen, right, and obviously, in reality, I don't have a right to be sitting here talking about Grenfell because there's so many residents who are alive today who should be sitting here talking about it, right? But we're talking about it because this is a platform where we can kind of raise awareness of a tragedy, that probably won't be given justice, in terms of on the greater scale of also in the media. But they want justice, right? Because as you said, that there was the cladding being part of the issue, right? So that's a major. It's not just an issue for Grenfell. It's an issue with many tower blocks up and down the UK, right? So that's why when they say that they're waiting for a tragedy to happen, mate, there's other blocks that can go up in flames as quick. But there's a lot of technicalities that I came across. For example, that one of the architects. So what we understand is that Ryden was the one that got the contracts, and there was an architect that was involved in this that was under Studio E, and this guy, he came up with a design for the whole external refurbishment of the building, right? And part of the design, there was a floor where there was gaps between the windows. So what happened was that when Grenfell was set alight, and this was happening maybe 12 a.m. like midnight, right? And there's a lot of blessings. There's blessings in because of the way it happened at the time that happened because of Ramadan and so forth, and we'll touch on that. So the flames took place, and from what I understood, from the second floor to maybe about the 22nd floor, it took 15 minutes. 15 minutes.
That's what I couldn't get it. Like you brothers, you go on those health and safety fire trainings and stuff like that, and they're on point. Everything they teach you there, it's like extinguishers, this, that, what you have to do, smoke, and it's like thorough. And then modern day 20th century, you have a fire like that, and it baffled me. It proper baffled me, thinking, Subhanallah, how did people die? Like,
see what's interesting, brother Junaid, like this stuff here is like a web of a scandal, man. I'm telling you, and I can't emphasize how messed up this is. Why 3 years later we're still talking about Grenfell, and why we haven't heard anyone being held to account. And one of the public inquiries videos that I saw, a little clip of one of the guys saying that there was like saying that there's a lot of issues here, and somehow some of the responsibility was getting pushed onto the London Fire Brigade, which I felt that this is a massive incident. The fire brigade has turned up. It's been asking people to stay indoors when there's a fire going on, and there's a lot of miscommunication and probably like issues around communication in terms of the technicalities on what was going on from headquarters to the men on site. That aside, we can't be looking at that, right? These are the after effects of why it's actually happened. So we're still talking about the architect, the design. We're talking about who's put forward the cladding, that being flammable, right? But there's another issue in terms of the insulation. So the insulation was coming from a company called Celotex, So Celotex initially provided a design for the insulation which had enough flammable retardants put in place. Do you understand? But when it came down to actually putting it onto the market and making it available, it was the it was the type of insulation that didn't have enough flammable retardant. So now we've got double trouble. We've got the cladding and the insulation, right? So the university, or I can't remember if it's Lancashire, one of the universities done a little presentation of this type of insulation, and it wasn't due to Grenfell. It was something they done prior to it, yeah. And it showed that this thing was going up in flames, like in speed, and the guy had to say that no, this video isn't being fast forwarded. Do you understand?
So,
It went up.
Rashid, so it seems like obviously there's collective responsibility here.
Absolutely.
So in terms of the company that put the cladding on, the company that done this, they should be held accountable. The Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea, the officials who went with this company, they should be held accountable. You know, so in order to give the victims of that fire, I'm just reading there was a couple there, you know, they were supposed to get married. And then, you know, they used to, just before that there was, you know, when you look at the cases, right, there was really sad cases. You know, you look at the ages, some of them were youngest too, 2 years old, 3 years old, 4 years old, stuff like that. Eldest were like, you know, 70 plus. So there was a mixture of a community. And what it is in that block, it was mainly what you would call ethnic minorities that used to live in that area, in that block.
Yeah.
So they were mainly part of the victims. And then you could also open the door again to institutional racism is at play again here. You know, the nature of these people, their background has played part. We can't disagree on that.
Bro,
That
50%, more than 50% of those people that died, they were like Muslim.
Yeah, I mean, a great number were Muslim, but also a great number were non-Muslim. But what they all had in common is that vast majority of these people were actually non-whites. And again, we playing that, you know, racism has played a part here, whether we like it or not. And this again ties into this, you know, Black Lives Matter movement again, that, you know, what people are advocating here is a very fair, equal society for all, regardless of race, religion, and so on. And here we played, you know, if you look at Grenfell, the victims, where they come from, who they were, that played a part. I guarantee you, if they were from the society that Winston Churchill was from, or the family background of Winston Churchill and the likes, there will be a different outcome. I honestly believe that. 3 years on, and it's just, you know, they say actions speak louder than words, and we see the action. So to bring this home, what the Grenfell community want is justice, like you said.
Inshallah.
Look,
So
there was I'm just going to read a little quote, yeah, of what one of the local residents, a brother called Mahad, yeah, he said, and this is something that he said in the documentary. He said that I've been documenting things. I've been finding out how many survivors there are. I'm getting to real gritty details of how many visitors there actually was in every person's house. But the council and the government, central government, and all of you lot, quote, quote, like the BBC, the media, because he's pointing at Richard Bilton, who was the journalist there at the time, yeah. And everyone else want to portray is just that tenants and occupants. But wait, what about my guests and my relatives? Yeah? So we're going back to, you know, you was mentioning there was 72 people accounted for, right? When we were going down, when we was on foot in that area, and if you heard what some of the residents were saying, that there was loads of people there, the corpse there, because you all got cordoned off, yeah? People were climbing in, climbing out, and there was a lot of, like, bodies that the locals were saying that they had seen. So true numbers were never being reflected. So that shows how much respect and courtesy was actually being given, in all honesty, to the locals. Do you understand? People lost family, people lost relatives, yeah. So it just shows that how much value does the human beings actually have, even when you're looking at an incident, yeah, that's local and that's domestic in the UK. You see?
yeah. Sorry, Rashid, any final thoughts before we move on to our last topic?
Yeah, I just want to say that, alhamdulillah, that the event happened during Ramadan. Muslims were coming back from Salah. They went and they raised the alarm, right? Muslims were being praised by locals for the role that they played, and that's just on the local estate level. But when we're talking about on the wider surrounding area, many Muslims from East London, from Sahamids here, went over there and were providing support. And I'm just talking about East London Sahamids. I'm sure there was other Muslims from other areas also attending. So
you're very pro Chai Hamlets, aren't you? They should give you the one of those.
No, forget that. I'm just saying I can only speak about where I am in it, so I don't want to be making things up and talking about other people. Do you understand? I'm sure there's people that also deserve to be mentioned, yeah, for the role that they played. But it just shows that the level of humanity that Muslims have, yeah, is deep. Because the reason why I'm talking about Muslims is because, firstly, Muslims aren't given credibility for the good work that they do. So it's only right for me as a Muslim to talk about my community. Do you understand? And Grenfell is an issue that changed the hearts, that reached the hearts of Muslims and non-Muslims, because that was an issue that affected that. Look, fires, yeah, don't discriminate, bruv. Yeah, many people died in that block, young, old, Muslim, non-Muslims. It bothers me, yeah, because an injustice is an injustice, and as a Muslim, we don't care who it is. If there's an injustice taking place, we want that resolved. Do you understand what I'm saying? So when I was looking into it, yeah, it was actually bothering me a lot, because to this day we don't see justice being served, and I stand behind the people of Grenfell, that community, and I think that as long as justice hasn't been served, we wait for justice to be served. Yeah, so that's all I want to say, basically.
Okay, so inshallah, we hope the people of Grenfell do get justice, and to bring, some sort of a peaceful end to that tragic event in their life. So going, because we are running out of time, so
yeah, so I'm gonna keep it short, inshallah, brother Nasir. My topic. I looked at the two topics and I thought, wow, these are like two big heavyweight topics, and we don't want to like kill off our listeners. Like that's it. This could be like their kind of bedtime story. Like that's it. They could go to bed. So I thought I needed to put something in there, a bit like just to kind of wrap the show up. And so I thought what would be a good topic, and I thought EDL would be a bit of a kind of a joke topic. And the reason being is because, I mean, it kind of added spice when I saw different things coming through the weekend, and I thought, wow. And it added.
So when you join the EDL, do you fill out a form?
Nah, I'll send a link over. Yeah, I thought it was quite complicated, but actually it's not. You just have to sing the anthem, right? And you just have to have a beer bottle in your hand. Okay.
I remember there was a brown boy in their crew, innit?
Listen, this is the point I was going to make today, yeah? So, first point I was going to make, I'll make the other point, second point. But the first point I'm going to make is today, yeah? I don't know if you guys noticed, yeah? Right? How many headlines did it hit in terms of the trouble and the riot they caused yesterday?
I don't think it hit that many.
Not many, yeah?
No,
when the Black Lives Matters happening, and there was a few skimmerish here and there, yeah, right?
That was viral.
How many days did they run those stories?
Long time, mate.
When we were talking about last week about Black Lives Matters and racism, bro, today was an example, a big example of how the media portray. Yesterday, if you saw the scenes of EDL, what they caused, okay? They came down. It wasn't about patriotism and all the rubbish that they're promoting. They came to confront and say that this is our country. This is what they did. Okay, they came looking for trouble. Full stop. Yeah, they're not patriotism. Man was pissing over that PC who passed away. And if you look at the way they behaved, everything. Do you think any of those people represent patriotism, the country? You send them out in the front line, I'll bet you none of them would go there. Yeah, and all of them, the ex-veterans that they're saying, they're all the ex-veterans that got kicked out. They couldn't do the boot camp, bruvs. Yeah, they must have done a 10 squats and all right, you're not fit for it, and they got kicked out.
You know the irony is right. They came to protect He was actually at the back of someone writing Winston Churchill was a racist. He was back of that. And the founder or ex-founder of EDL, Tommy, who's still refusing to come onto our show, by the way. But anyway, so they came to protect, i.e. the statues. And the police were also there to protect the statues, right? So in effect, you got two kinds of people trying to do the same thing. But somehow they ended up, those EDL people and the football hooligans, they teamed up. They came under a different name, they got all these funny names anyway. And they came and then they attacked the police who supposedly protecting statue and thing. And in this event, there was this guy urinating on a memorial.
It's because they have a public urinator in it.
That was given to PC, I think Keith Palmer, I think it was, or Chroma. So now you might say, okay,
I think why it was important.
No, hold on. This is the funny thing, right? You might say, hold on, he's in his own defense, and I was thinking of this, right? Look, forget the guy's racist, forget what he's come for. It's nature calls, right? And when nature calls, we're all the same, regardless, what we look like on the outside. I thought maybe he's desperate. He needed to go. And he just didn't maybe realize there was a plaque there. And he just wanted to go, and he just went. But what you don't realize is where he went wasn't just any old gate. That's and this is the biasness of the media. When they take that picture, they took a close up, maybe to show what's going on. But that gate is not any old gate. That's the gate of Houses of Parliament. So, this is one of the gates, right? So he knew exactly what he was doing. So this idea that he made a mistake is nonsense. He knew exactly what he was doing.
I think the reason why I put this topic on here is just for everybody to listen at. The EDL are racist criminals, full stop. There's no other way other. I just wanted to just say that, because there's no other way to describe them. So, initially they came out anti-Muslim, this, and, they were against all of this, the Sharia law coming in and all of that rubbish. And then the Muslim grooming gangs and all of that.
Yeah. So that's the thing, when they when they first came out, their push was, anti-Muslim, anti-Islam, anti-this, anti-that, all to do with Muslims and Islam. And it seemed like they had a problem with Islam and Muslims. But as time went on, we see they got problems with you as well. Black people, they got problems with you. Brown people, Hindus, they got problems with you. And this is just a fake facade they put in people in the beginning that they were, against Islam. And ironically, despite all that they claim to do in terms of being pro Winston Churchill and so on, I think Winston Churchill, if he was alive today, he would call these people an embarrassment. And he would not even like them, because they're not from the same class or the same elite as he's from. Most of these people are ill-educated, don't even probably know anything about Winston Churchill or anything about anyone to that extent. They went to fight, and we've seen images, right? They went to fight, and a lot of the times they got beaten up. They got beaten up.
The images, I hope they're okay, because some of the falls that they had, it looked quite serious. Some of them got quite a bit, kind of some heavy battering, and.
Yeah, but they probably hit themselves, innit? They were intoxicated.
Well, yeah, it must probably a non-white ambulance crew attending to them and treating them in hospital as well,
But there was a hero amongst them. Yeah, amongst them there was a black man who rescued one of them into safety. So he needs to be acknowledged for his bravery and his humanity. He saved an EDL member from himself.
Anyway, bro, I think I've given enough airtime to them, so I'm out, and over to you, brother Nasir, inshallah, to Bidai lose some,
Yeah, so Junaid, he's promoted, him and his mates from the EDL, and he's gonna put a link in for you to join them, Rashid. I wonder what happened with that Asian guy from Glasgow.
He got promoted, didn't he?
You know,
He's gone.
That's me.
He's the PA for Nigel Farage.
anyway, with that, so as a closing remark, Junaid, you got any closing remarks before we end the show today?
No, I just wanted to say, inshallah, you know, firstly, obviously, with the Grenfell, I think when you hear some of the stories, subhanAllah, it's quite horrific. And when you hear the people that were on the phone and talking to loved ones whilst they, you know, were burning, and it's quite, yeah. So I think it's important that we remember those individuals in our dua, and also keep as a ummah, we need to also keep a lookout for those families and support them where we can, inshallah.
Rashid, you got any closing remarks?
Yeah, as much as Grenfell Tower touches us, you know what I mean? There's many Grenfell Towers happening around the world, do you understand? And we still got places like Syria to worry about. We still got Philistine, and we still got Kashmir. We've got tragedy in our global family in lots of places. So it's just something that we've always got to maintain a level of consciousness within ourselves to make sure that our hearts are connected domestically and overseas. So I think that's something that's important. And at the same time, we've got to try and make sure that the future gems that we have in our community, especially those living in the West, we've got to invest in them. So we can't have another Winston Churchill, mate, popping out of thin air. Do you understand? We want Muslims to contribute to Britain positively. Do you understand? So they're going to be the ones who need to set a whole new standard of leadership, honesty, you know what I mean, being legitimate, law-abiding, yeah? So when we've got money to be used, we use it in the right way. Because if I remember correctly, and you can correct me, that I think one of the Khalif, I think it was Umar radiallahu anhu, and they were in the treasury at the time, and just as they were going to talk about worldly matters, yeah, they put the lantern out. Do you understand? They put the lantern out because they were going to talk about something that had nothing to do with their job. Do you understand?
Mm.
So look at the level of concern that they've got for the wealth of the community. They didn't want to burn out based on their own interests. Do you understand? And this is because that we have concern and worry about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We have someone to be accountable to. If you don't have anyone to be accountable to, then you're going to do what you want to do. Do you understand? And as Muslims, we have to be conscious about that. So when we instill values, we want to instill the best of values to produce the best of leaders, because we have the best of leaders to show to the world in our history. Do you understand? So I think it's important that we don't talk about Winston Churchill without worrying about the fact that we need to produce something far greater than that can be a benefit to mankind. Jazakallah khair.
Okay, inshallah, jazakallah khair to both of you. Just before I end it, yeah, so in terms of a recap, leadership is not to better the few, but to better the many. And here what we find is that whether it's Winston Churchill or Boris Johnson or any other leader, is that they're selective in their leadership in terms of who they promote, who they favor, and who gets the largest share of the cake in society. So to have great leadership is to be fair and equal and just, not to apply double standards. With Grenfell, I hope the victims of that may Allah forgive you and give you Jannah. And those non-Muslims who died, I hope you find peace, and for your family to find peace. And as for the EDL, well, and the likes, I can only say, look, if you only achieve E's and D's in your GCSEs, there's only so much you can do in life. So with that, inshallah, we'll leave it there. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah.
Wa alaikum assalam.